The Minister of Finance withdrew his proposed increase of VAT by a half a percentage point this year and a half a percentage point next year. And there's been a lot of analysis, but I thought we would get a good view from our special guest, our very own political insider, and that's Kuhla Nkamani. Kuhla, welcome to the State of the Nation update.
Well, Mike, thank you so much. It's great to be back, this time from Pretoria, actually. Wished to be in studio, but this was impromptu.
Yes.
South Africa's filled with news that just catches us by surprise.
Yeah, and we must respond to it. So it did catch us a little by surprise because we had the Minister of Finance defending his VAT increase, taking it all the way into the courtroom. And then in late night communications, the whole proposal to increase VAT was withdrawn. I suppose the burning question would be, in your opinion, was this as a result of some of these smaller non-GNU partners like Action SA, Build One South Africa, that suddenly came with a whole lot of wonderful ideas that could be used instead of raising VAT, or do you think this was because of the impending legal defeat that the Minister of Finance was going to suffer?
Well, Mike, it's more on the second part than the first. What's news worth noting is the fact that what we've heard from birds whispering and, things whispering is very loud nowadays, but we've heard the fact that ANC lawyers have approached the DA lawyers late last night while we were all asleep to ask or to actually find a settlement to this whole issue outside of court, Basically, that was the whole discussion. And the DA were pretty smart by actually releasing a statement late last night, to jump onto this before this whole media show that we saw today by all these parties that you mentioned earlier on. Number two is the fact that for Action SA and for BOSA and the rest, this is a get out of jail free card that they were praying for. One needs to understand they have been wetting their pants for the last 2 to 3 weeks, looking at the impending, VAT increase that was coming. The ANC was not ready to stop. And I think there's a lot of stuff that has been sort of swept under the rug by Godongwana and his finance team saying, look, DA, let's meet, let's agree to avoid any further trouble. So I think that's my analysis on this issue.
Yeah. Now, of course, there's this has become less about the VAT burden, which was obviously bad enough and should have remained the topic, but it's become a question about the future of the government of national unity, political posturing, all kinds of things. This is a fight within a fight. Now, the first thing you've touched on it already. These parties, especially the most verbose being Action SA, that are outside of the government of national unity, were quick to claim victory. They said they were going to stop the VAT increase, and now, miraculously, the VAT increase has been stopped. But it's got to be said that the ANC and Godongwana remained committed to this increase till the bitter end, and it's only the lawyers that seem to have stopped it.
Well, Mike, I think it goes back to what I think we mentioned 2-3 weeks ago, or last week rather, where we spoke of the ANC having mixed messaging to these different political parties. It's not the first time they've met with the DA on this issue. Let's highlight that. They've spoken to the DA about let's find a way of working together to keep this JNU alive. That's what we hear on the media reports. They've spoken to Action SA. I've heard former colleagues raising that, saying that they will find ways to stop the VAT increase. That was the whole idea with Alan Beasley, Action SA's finance guru in Parliament. And then they've also spoken to the IFP, where they've come to us, in the media and stated that this is a short-term solution. We need to highlight, and I'm quoting what Velenkosini Hlabisa said. Now, firstly, the biggest losers out of this, Mike, everyone thinks it's the ANC. What I'll tell you, it's not the ANC, it's the IFP. They're the biggest losers because they were dead certain on a VAT increase. They were not budging. They were saying it's a short-term solution. And another thing is it's time for the ANC to read the room. You know, the ANC loves parties that are yes, ma'am, yes, sir type of parties. They love Patricia de Lille because she doesn't oppose in those cabinet meetings. If Ramaphosa tells her today we're signing an agreement for a tourism program with Russia, trust me, there will be tourism, South Africa and Russia working together. So it was key that we had a democratic alliance that actually opposed because it was bound to happen. We couldn't run on this thing of EWC getting approved, Bella Bill getting approved, NHI getting approved, now the VAT. And I mean, the ANC was literally having their way the whole way. But a little bird tells me that the DA actually met up with Ramaphosa and and his cabal, and actually made mention of the fact that the more and more Ramaphosa runs on these issues, is the more and more he loses power within his own party. So I can tell you, Paul Mashatile, deputy president, is very angry at the VAT not being passed. He is probably the angriest man in the room outside of his supposed, story of him being assassination attempt and also stuff. But he's angry about this. And Enoch Gorongwana is someone else that is extremely angry because this is the first time their way or their will is not the way, as well as this is very bad for the communists and for the supposed leftovers of the RET in the ANC who wanted to oppose the DA the whole way. You will remember that Paul Mashatile said, how can we have a DA that stays in the GNU but didn't vote for this budget? Well, tada, welcome. The VAT has been dropped, which means the budget is not the same, which now we can turn the question around and say, well, Deputy President, this is not the budget that you represented now. You are changing things. And for me, it's a great win for the DA. Action SA are using this as a gimmick, as if they've won, while they haven't won. For them, it's a get out of jail free card. And I'll be happy to hear I'll be eagerly waiting rather to hear what Herman Mashaba has to say outside of this press conference. Because let's get one thing straight. They are not the winners. They literally were praying that the DA wins this in court. Because to promise you, next week, this time around, the debit orders were coming in with a 15.5% increment.
Yeah, but this may be a Pyrrhic victory for the Democratic Alliance. Much like, I suppose, a wife that gets, a successful restraining order against the husband. I don't suppose it makes for very safe dining. You may just want to test what's in your food after that. But I can't see how this is going to make the GNU a happier place than what it was before. I mean, it wasn't so happy then, but now having challenged successfully the ANC on the issue that the ANC were prepared to die on. The ANC were desperate to tax the poor even more, and so were the communists, and so were, the Mashatile faction. They were desperate to tax poor South Africans and all South Africans even more rather than cut costs. This is the worst case scenario for the ANC, and it's the DA that's done it to them. Can the GNU survive this?
Yes, and yes, it will. The GNU, as I've said and I've been predicting, will probably make it till. And the interesting thing is, both the DA and the ANC have got their conference and congress respectively around the same time, being 2026 and 2027. But it will make it past 2026, agreed. But till 2029 is the big question, if it will get to 2029, because you sort of ask yourself, do the rest of the ANC cabal outside of Ramaphosa have the stomach to listen to another party?
Yep.
That do they actually have the listening ear, or is it their way or the highway? And I can promise you that for a large part of things. The other part of the ANC, which is, for me, I believe is far worse than the EFF, when it comes to a listening ear, um, will be ready to take us down that dead end where they will be killing this GNU. I mean, the ANC's SG, from the ANC Women's League SG, said they hate the GNU. I'm not making this up. She said it out of her own lips. She says they hate the GNU, they don't want the DA. And a lot of hate goes towards the DA, which I think you did a great piece on last week. But a lot of hate goes towards the DA. And now understand this, Mike, is the Women's League in the ANC is a large part of the ANC. Everyone knows in order to win a conference, you need to appease the Women's League. It's the bottom line. Now, imagine a women's league saying, we hate the DA. Get out. You've got a Paul Mashatile who wants to see the backside of Helen Ziller. You've got a shaky Fikile Mbalula, who I do think will keep the GNU. But, yeah. And then you've got the rest of these, deadbeat guys sitting on this end praying for the DA to leave. Vultures waiting for them to go out. Trust me, Mike, the country is hanging on a thin thread. I won't mention who told me this, but it's a great friend from the ANC, who was working very closely with one of the ministers who's no longer minister in the ANC. And he makes mention to me. He says, Kuhle, South Africa is hanging on a thin thread. He says the amount of infighting in the ANC that is going on at the moment is actually being covered by the GNU and by Ramaphosa. And you'll find it funny, how is it being covered by the GNU? But because the GNU's drama actually covers all the internal factions that go on in the ANC. As in, this is the first time in history where we don't have an idea what's going to happen after 2027, after an ANC conference. Because Ramaphosa's term is coming to an end, he's at his weakest. Boom, that's done. You've got ministers who are sort of possibly going to challenge the deputy president, which is the first time, mind you, again, where you see a strong challenge coming from the ministers. And one thing that I can tell you, Mike, there is no good story that is going to come out of this. There's absolutely no good story. There is no hero. There is no messiah. The poor is going to suffer the most. We are going to see an increment in grants continuing. And I'm saying this with confidence. I'm not saying this out of guessing. This is what people are whispering to me in my ears. You will see, because there's this idea that the ANC has that somehow giving money to the poor is the way of solving poverty. Don't know which economic school did they go to. But we'll also be, and mind you, this is not the last time we'll be hearing of VAT. It's not the last time. We sort of forget that there's a clause in this VAT that was passed in this budget that speaks of an increment next year. Some people are forgetting of that clause that is somewhere written for next year. Remember, what we have passed is the 2025-26 budget currently, where we're saying no more VAT. We're forgetting about the 2026-27. So that is still going to be a future challenge that we're about to meet, and no one is talking about that. But to your question, the GNU will hold till 2027 at least.
But let's go back to the budget. The budget, as presented by the minister in his speech, surely now what was voted for can't be passed because that has changed. Does he have to redraft his budget speech, redeliver the budget speech? Should it be revoted on? Because, this increase that now is not going through is going to dramatically change the balance of his budget. So surely the next step is for him to draft a budget and deliver it in Parliament, and a vote must follow.
Yes, that should be. I mean, firstly, you'll get it past going through the finance committees. That's where it actually has to start, where the ANC, luckily, I was about to say unfortunately, but luckily for us as South Africans, they don't have a majority in that finance committee. So that's where it starts. And we know that there will be a 75 billion rand deficit over the next 3 years. Currently, that's what the ANC say, with cutting what you call it, with cutting this VAT. Well, it's shocking, but let me not digress and go down that road of anger. But there has to be a way where we look at how do we cover up this financial deficit, where is government going to get the money? And that is the big question that looms for Enoch Godongwana. Because I can tell you, he has actually gone from pot to fire, from kettle to pot, that situation of bad to worse. Because yes, he has cut it. He has cut the VAT and said no more VAT. And I can tell you, for Enoch Godongwana, the VAT was a good thing for him because it would have given his department a lot of reprieve and was a get out of jail card for him personally. But for the rest of us, no. And then now he's got to sit and balance the books. And he's got a big thing hanging over his head where every department, especially within the context of a GNU, will not want a reduced budget. You will remember one thing. The GNU is a mix of many parties, a mix of many parties wanting to outshine one another so that come 2029, one is on top of the other. Now, what does that mean? That means Department of Public Works will want a bigger budget, which we have seen, same as Home Affairs, same as the rest, So it's going to be very difficult in terms of Enoch Godongwana navigating how he balances the books. Who does he decrease for? Who does he increase for? Because you've got different partners. It's no longer the ANC. In the past, it was easy. You could just tell Princess Stella Ndabeni, listen, my dear, we're cutting your budget by 40%. Don't complain. You're part of the ANC. We're all in charge. This time around, no, that's not possible. You've got a Johnston Hazen. You've got Gayton McKenzie, as much as he's a yes, sir, yes, ma'am type of a guy, which we have seen, but he's there. And those are the difficulties that we have. But one thing is certain, Mike, is the ANC will look at cutting anything else except for government perks. They will keep the medical aid, they will keep the German sedans and everything else that is literally hurting the poor. And it goes back to the question of who are you protecting yourself from? I mean, the other day I saw, who was it again, who came through to this other conference that we're at? One of the ministers, slips my mind, but one of these, I would call them the useless departments, coming in with a motorcade of 3 to 4 cars. Yeah. And I said, but who on earth is going to attack you? I don't even know that you exist. I only found out because you're coming to this conference, So it's those type of things of really, we need to be honest. We need to cut the budget and we need to move away from, I'll tell you one real problem that we're facing in South Africa that no one wants to speak of. We've got politicians that love the limelight. You love to over glorify and over VIP, make unnecessary things very important, which cost a lot of money and they're not ready to cut. We should cut on our civil sector. It's bloated. Why do you have a Department of Military Veterans? I'm waiting for the answer. Why do you have a Department of Women and Children? Just merge that with Gayton McKenzie. Why do you have certain departments? Cut it. Cut the ministers in the presidency. They are useless. And if you think it ends there, Mike, I'll tell you something that people don't know. In municipalities, you've got what you call directors in the mayor's office who act as the ministers of presidencies, who act as ministers in the presidency. That's where we need to cut. Those people are useless. They are ceremonial. They literally don't even have an agenda that sits on their desk. They don't know what they're doing if you ask them. They are just there to add to the wage bill.
I think we know about, and it wouldn't be that difficult to work out where you could get the savings from. We understand the bloat. We understand the state-owned companies, all of these functions that need not exist. We wouldn't notice if they weren't there. But going back to the minister's budget speech, I think what you're going to see in there is pretty much the same expenditure. And all that's going to happen is that his estimate for income is going to increase dramatically because the magic bullet has been what Edward Kieswetter said to them, that he's going to get all this money that is uncollected, all of this money that's sitting over there, and because the SARS is under-resourced, they couldn't go and get the money, and now that they are getting more money, they will bring us a lot more money, and therefore the budget will be balanced. So I think that you're going to see budget cuts by stealth, in that it's going to go through with the same expenditure, except that always, every budget, your income is guesswork. Your expenditure is generally, your income should be written in pencil. Your expenditure is in pen. Only because you're committing to that, and salaries get paid at the end of the month, and rent and so on. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a made up number for income, which mystically increases by 80 billion rand. And maybe Mr. Kiswetter knows where this money is sitting that isn't being paid, and he's going to go very hard at it. And that's going to be the story, which we'll only know for sure this time next year whether he did collect it or not.
Mr. Keith Sweater's what you call source spoke of investing, subject to correction, but millions of rands into systems of actually collecting revenue that they were not collecting, which includes getting tax money from South Africans that stay abroad, the rest, crypto, the whole story of how they are planning on getting more money. The bottom line is, Mike, no amount of taxing is going to take South Africa out of its financial burdens. As soon as the ANC and SARS and the rest understand that, there's no amount of taxing. Corporates have been taxed to the T. We in the business sector, we personal income taxpayers, we've been taxed to the T. We can't pay more tax. People literally work. If you earn over R1 million, last point, if you earn over R1 million, understand me when I say that you only work for 5 months out of the 12 months of the year, because you only get about 50% of your salary.
Well, there's a thing called Tax Freedom Day. Tax Freedom Day is the day after which your money, all your work up to that day has been to pay your taxes. And our Tax Freedom Day is the 15th of May. So to everybody that's watching this, you've still got 1 more month to work before you've finished paying your taxes. Not 1 cent, if you looked at it that way, has gone to you yet. In most countries, it would be about 2 months less than this, and I suppose that's the best way to put it in context. But obviously, the burning question and the thing to watch, I know you say that the government of national unity will survive. I think that it's in the air. I think that it's going to make for very tense discussions coming up in all of in cabinet and in parliament. I think that this is we've spoken many times about DA red lines, and the ANC just burst through each one of those red lines where they said, you won't pass the Bella bill into law, you won't pass the expropriation bill into law, and the ANC just disregarded them and did exactly what they did. I think that the ANC has got a red line, and this was it, and this was around the money, because the ANC has said, don't touch us around money and don't touch us around foreign policy. And I think that the DA has touched them around money, and whichever way we look at it, there's going to be less money to steal, and that doesn't sit well with the ANC. We understand the largesse and the way that the ANC works. I think a red line has been crossed here, and I think that the rest of 2025 is going to be one highlights reel after another, while these two incompatible parties try and keep this ship together as it hurtles towards the barrier at the end of the runway, because I don't see this thing taking off, whichever way you slice it, not unless there is some sessions with a great psychologist. I can't see these two parties finding each other at all. And I think that the DA has crossed the ANC's line. The difference between the DA's lines and the ANC's lines is that the ANC sits with 2 options. And people forget that they've got now, I think that one of the errors of the DA is to open the ANC's eyes to the second option. The one option that always existed was getting the old band back together again, MKEFF, the so-called Doomsday Coalition. We know that Paul Mashatile favors that. Nice. And then, of course, there's the ANC light, or the Johannesburgification of South Africa, and that is you get all of these bullshit parties together, Action SA, Rise Mzansi, Bosa, you end up with, by my count, just over 200 out of 400 seats in Parliament. and you have your way with them because none of them have got the standing to challenge the ANC. And I think that it's going to be way too attractive for the ANC to turn this down and to act in the best interests of the country. I've never seen them acting in the best interests of the country. VAT, their devotion to increasing VAT tells you that they couldn't give a shit about people regardless of where you sit on the economic scale. I'd be very surprised if the GNU survives in its current format. But we will keep watching. Kuhle and Kamani, thank you so much for your contribution. It's all very, very interesting. Keep watching, keep your wallet where you can see it, because the government's going to come after it. And if Mr. Kieswetter has his way, he might just extract another 100 billion rand out of this economy in improved tax collections, and that's going to hurt everybody. But save some money by using Pace Car Rental. They keep us on the air. And you do by subscribing to the channel. Please subscribe as we break yet another milestone. And we'll see you again on the State of the Nation update. Kushle, thank you so much for joining us today.